and one day you're going to figure it out. Man, that was a blessing, Jeff. Thank you. Good evening. Y'all well? I'm glad you're back tonight. Man, glad I didn't scare you off this morning, but grateful for you to be back together with the church tonight. If you would turn over to the book of Luke with me tonight. I would like for you to go to Luke chapter 11, verse 25. And for those of you that's been coming on Sunday nights, you know that we started a series last week called Outside the Walls. And the idea is that on Sunday nights we're going to look at how we as a church can impact our community outside the walls of our church. We've been really, I said last week that I feel like we do a pretty fair job with the church stuff. I feel like we do pretty good with biblical teaching. We do great with music. We do great with kids, great with youth. I mean, we are doing all the right things within the walls of this church. We're trying to disciple people, to lift them up. There is a spirit of joy within this church that I'm so honored that we have. It's such a blessing to have it, because I don't know if you've visited around very much, but that's not always the case everywhere you go. You guys are loving people, and we got a lot of things going in the right way within the church, but I am convicted that we are only here to equip you to live outside the walls of the church. Now, church culture has often been a bit misguided, if you will. It's been a bit misguided because it's like, well, my goal is to be at the church. Man, I want to, on Sundays, I'm going to be committed on Sundays. On Wednesdays, I'm going to be committed on Wednesdays. But somehow along the way, often we end up compartmentalizing our Christianity. Do you know what I'm saying? We compartmentalize it. We're a certain way on this day, and then tomorrow we fall right back into the ways that everybody around us live. We allow them to set the temperature, right? And we react like a thermometer, right? When things are hot, man, we get hot. When things are cold, man, we get cold. And when people are excited, we get excited. When people are down, we get down. And we allow ourselves to be more like a temperature gauge. But I want to say, as believers, you should be more like a thermostat. So think about this for a second. I don't know if this is new for you. I don't know where I heard it from. But, man, we should be more like a thermostat, setting the temperature wherever we are. Meaning we're influencing the people that are around us. We're setting the temperature. We're not reacting to it, right? And if you are truly walking out your faith, you are truly taking the things that we talk about on Sundays, on Wednesdays, in discipleship groups, in Sunday school, if you are taking those things, applying them to your life, man, you should be setting the temperature, the spiritual temperature of people all around you at work, and especially at your home. If you are a man of God, you should be leading your family. If you are a woman of God, you should be leading your children. You should be doing all of these things because of your investment, the investment that's being made in you. Now, I feel like I said, one of the major crutches of the church is that we often compartmentalize our Christianity, meaning we are committed to the doing of church. As far as coming and being part of and never missing it, we do pretty good at those things. But I'm afraid that if you don't know your neighbor, that if you don't know the people at your work beyond their first name, if you don't know anything about those that are around you, man, I would venture to say you're not living your faith outside the walls of the church. So we've been talking about that. Last week we looked at Jesus' example that he gave the disciples. He took the disciples after what we talked about this morning with the Lord's Supper. Sometime along that same range of that night, he stood up and he took off his cloak and he wrapped himself in a towel, and he got down and took the position of a servant. He had the right heart, and he tried to pass that to the disciples. He told the disciples, the reason I'm doing this is so you will go and thus do likewise. You will go and you will serve other people. That was a transferring really a servant's heart to the disciples. Man, we should be servants to those that are around us. They should, when they think about us, they should think about us as being givers, not takers, right? I remember in Hawaii, I had a friend that I met down the road. He lived 2 or 3 houses beyond me, and he was a white guy like me from the mainland. He wasn't a Pacific Islander, and but he had been there his whole life. His mom and dad raised him there, and I remember him telling me, he says, "Man, you probably have adapted to living here faster than I've ever seen anybody adapt to living here." I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." He says, "Man, people come here and they try to be a certain way. They try to push their ways on us here on the island." He said, "But man, you have done amazing at just trying to get to know people." He's like, "Man, when you care about what other people care about, the way they see and view things, when you care about those and you ask questions and you get to know your neighbors." I knew every person on our street, every single person on the street, and most of the streets around us within walking distance, because I simply would stop and talk. Man, I would talk and I would ask questions and I would try to get to know people's life. And man, we got to be that way. We've got to be givers. We got to be care about other people. And that was another thing he said. He said, "Man, what I've seen from you guys since you've been on the island the last year to year and a half, man, y'all are about other people, not about yourself." And he said, "That's hard to find." He said, "People come over here to Hawaii because they are about themselves. They're giving themselves the most beautiful place to live, the most beautiful homes. They're giving themselves all of these things. And it's not about what they can give to the community, but it's about what they can take for themselves." And man, we need to be known for giving and loving and caring for other people. So tonight, we have already looked at the servant's heart. Tonight we are going to, again, all of these are heart issues really, but we are going to look at the parable of the Good Samaritan. I know that for many of you, you're like, "Oh man, I've heard this preached so many times." Good. You need to hear it again. Tonight we're going to be looking at the parable of the Good Samaritan. So I'm going to begin reading in chapter 10, verse 25. "Behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to test, saying, 'Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?' He said to him, 'What is written in the law? How do you read it?' And he answered, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself.' And he said to him, 'You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live. You will have eternal life. If you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.' Then verse 29, "But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, 'Oh, who is my neighbor?' Jesus replied, 'A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back.' Which of these 3 do you think proved to be the neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" And he said, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, you go and do likewise. As I said, as I started tonight, I know this is probably nothing new for you, but man, this really has something to do with how we live outside the walls of the church. It really does. It's a heart posture about how we see people outside the walls of the church. Man, how we care for our neighbors around us. Man, I know that there are a lot of economic divides within just the area that we live in, just right here in this community. You think just for a moment, just, within a stone's throw that way, is one of the most, one of probably where there's more arrest happening in that part of Lee County than any other place. And then there's some others around us that have some of the same things, right? And we're in a very diverse area. We're in an area that, man, a lot of different types of people live here in this area, right? Man, there are some lessons that we can take from the Samaritan, from the Good Samaritan, with where we live today. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that some more tonight. But I want us to go through the Bible a little bit more. I want to teach through this scripture a bit more. The most important commandments is where this whole thing starts. Man, love the Lord your God, your heart, with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. The two most important commandments. See, we all get that. I talked about that a lot in the past. I said, man, you've got first your vertical commandments. The first 6 commandments are vertical commandments between how you and God interact. And your horizontal commandments, the last 4, is how we view and treat our neighbor, how we love our neighbor, how we don't love our neighbor, however you want to frame that. But then this Pharisee, this lawyer, asked this question. He says, well, then who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And Jesus begins this parable, and I'm going to try to fill in a few blanks for you as we go through this. So Jesus tells this parable. A man was going from Jerusalem to Jericho. This is an important piece of the story. A man is going from Jerusalem to Jericho. So Jerusalem, everybody knows what's in Jerusalem, was the temple was in Jerusalem, and it was the center of life for most Jews, right? But in Jericho, they would have to travel to Jericho to do a lot of business, right? So by him saying that a man went from Jerusalem to Jericho, he was actually insinuating that this man was a Jew. That's who traveled this road most of the time. He was insinuating that. So he says that a man was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. It says this man fell upon a den of robbers, which was a normal thing. I've done a lot of background study on this, and that trail where it would walk, they called it a road, but it wasn't much of one, but where it would walk, I've seen pictures of it, and there's lots of rocks and boulders and things around that made it very easy for people to be able to hide behind and then attack when they would walk through. And this was a normal thing. So, man, he's telling him about something that's happened on a place that this man knows. This man knows about this road from Jerusalem to Jericho. He knows that there's a tendency of robbing and looting and those things that happens up there. Jesus is using this parable because this man can truly relate to it. He says, man, as he went, he was robbed, he was beaten, and he was left for dead. And then Jesus, what he does here is he said 3 men passed by. 3 men passed by. And I want us to look at each one of those separately. So of these 3 men, it's funny to me, he started with a priest, right? Starts with a priest. He started with me, right? A pastor, a priest, walks past this man, sees this man hurting on the side of the road, and what does he do? He walks across to the other side of the road and walks on past him. It's funny to me that he starts with a priest first. He says, man, this man fell. He fell to robbers. He was laying there, left for dead, and a priest, which you would assume would be the most godly, the most religious, the most compassionate person, right? That's where he starts. He says, man, he just walked right past. And then he talks about the second person. This is the Levite. The Levites were one of the 12 tribes, but they were the priest's tribe, basically. They were this tribe that, man, they had all of these things. They couldn't cut their hair. They couldn't touch dead body. All these things, like they were very religious, very prestigious, and these men were viewed as leaders throughout the Jewish people. And so he picks a priest, then he picks a Levite, essentially the same thing. Levite, same thing. He walks right past. But then he comes to the third person, which is the Samaritan. He says the Samaritan comes and he sees this man and he's moved with compassion. Why is that important that he picks the Samaritan? If what I said, and there's some speculation, it's not in the Bible, but there's some speculation here that this man was possibly Jewish, okay? So if he's traveling and he's a Jewish man, why in the world did he pick a Samaritan to be the compassionate one? Because they hated their guts. They hated them. They hated them. They looked at them as half-breeds. They didn't want anything to do with them. Do you remember the woman at the well? That story, man, when they're traveling, they normally would walk an extra day or more to go around this area to keep from walking through Samaria. But Jesus says, no, we must go through Samaria because he knew there was a divine appointment there, and he must go through Samaria. Man, they hated the Samaritan people. So to pick someone like a Samaritan to be the good one of the story was a bit repulsive to the people that he was talking to. They couldn't understand why, of all the people, why did you say the Samaritan was the one that had compassion? Why does he have to be the good one? Why couldn't it have been one of us? Why couldn't it have been the priest? Why couldn't it have been... The fact is that the Samaritan, it was less about the Samaritan, more about his heart, more about his compassion. See, he didn't judge the man based on where he's from, what tribe he's from, what he believed. Man, he just saw someone that was in need, that needed help. And he stopped and he helped him. He cared for his wounds. He put him on his own animal. He took him to town. He put him up in the inn. He paid. He said, even here's some more money to cover him if he needs to stay a few more days. And if anything's left, I will pay it when I come back. So Jesus lays all these things out. The priest, the Levite, the Samaritan, he lays these three things out. And then he says, let me ask you, who is the good neighbor? Who's the good neighbor? Who's the good neighbor? And I don't know if you paid attention to what he said, but he didn't say the good Samaritan. The Samaritan was the good neighbor. He didn't say that. He was like the man who helped him, right? There's a lot to do with that as well, man. Again, just the rejection of who it was that had the compassion and cared for him. Man, he said, the good neighbor was the one who helped him. Man, I want you to see the fact that the Samaritan had great compassion, that he made a sacrifice. It was a sacrifice of his time. It was a sacrifice of his money. And he did those things, and he crossed social barriers. Like he didn't care, again, who he was, what he was. He just knew a man was hurting and he needed help. So let me ask a question. How does this apply to our lives? How does this apply to our lives? Think for just a moment. How does this apply to our lives? How could this change the way we treat people? So if Jesus was here and he was telling this parable to Old Union Baptist Church, how may he weave our culture into this story? Think just for a minute. I want your minds to think about this for just a moment. How would he weave our culture into this story? Okay, now, here we go. All right, how he might weave this into the story. he may take a drug dealer, one that has been in prison multiple times. You've seen him on the news. You know who he is. He's a local boy. Some of you taught him. You know who this guy is. And you know that you don't want to go fill up your car in Shannon after dark. Okay? So, I mean, not in Shannon, in Verona after dark, right? And you see this guy, and he is had a car wreck, and he is across the road from the church, and here comes the preacher, okay? That would be me, all right? So here comes the preacher. Y'all know me, always in a hurry. Oh, man, I got stuff to do. I got things. One night I pulled out of here one night, and I started backing up. Jackson was with me. Started backing up, and there was these two little girls that had pulled up in a little car, and they had stopped right in front of the church. They pulled over right there, and I backed out, and I was trying to get home. Man, I'd been over here all afternoon, evening meetings and stuff. I was trying to get home, and I put it in drive, and I pulled up about 10 feet, and I stopped, and I backed back up. And I said, hey, what's going on? And she said, well, I don't know. The thing's saying it's hot and it's smoking. And I was like, all right, give me a second. You know, I was like, how can I drive off when God brought these two girls and set them in front of the door of the church, and the pastor of all people is going to get in his truck and drive off and leave them stranded? They're like 15. No, they probably weren't 15. They had driver's license, I guess. But they looked like little young girls, right? They were nervous. So I came in, I got like 4 or 5 bottles of water, and I went out, and she said, can you show me what you're doing? I was like, well, let me go get, so I got a T-shirt out, and I was like, you know, this is what my dad showed me. You always put a shirt on top of the radiator cap, and you turn it real slow because the hot can spew out. And she was like, oh, okay. And so I showed her that, and I put water in there. I was like, you guys need to sit for a little bit. And I got to talk to her, and she said, thank you so much for stopping and helping me. I know you were leaving. I was like, well, it's no big deal. And she said, can I hug you? I was like, yeah, that's fine, you know. And, man, I could have easily just drove off. I could have left her stranded there. So we've got this known drug dealer, this offender. He's wrecked in front of the church, and the pastor drives right by. Then, after that, we've got one of the deacons. Man, he comes by and he recognizes the guy. He's like, man, that guy's probably come set me up. He's probably going to rob me. Something's about to happen. I'll call and tell the police department maybe that he's down here, but I ain't stopping, you know, keeps driving, okay? So painting this picture here. And then comes along another person. Now, my mind's kind of gone blank. Who would be a candidate for this? Can somebody help me? Who would be a candidate for this? This is the good person, but someone you wouldn't assume it would be. Somebody? Well, I think everybody would assume Miss Sonia would stop and help. She's not good. She's not a good. People are pointing at you, Miss Sonia, but you're not a good example, because I think everybody in here would say she would stop and help. You know, she would stop and help. I'm struggling. My whole picture is falling apart because I can't think of who this would be that would be obviously not the. Someone that would be like your enemy. Right. Someone we don't like. Okay, so maybe another gang. You know, you've got multiple gangs. You know, maybe it's somebody else, and they stop and they help. Right. So whatever it is, you get the idea that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are. It matters what kind of heart that you have. Right. And that's what he's trying to say there. He's like, it doesn't matter what ethically is different. It doesn't matter what walk of life you're from. It doesn't matter about any of these things. It matters that they are a human being, get this, created in the image of God. Created in the image of God. And then if we keep that in our mind, that, man, when we see people, even if we don't agree with their lifestyle, even if we don't agree with what they've done or what they're doing, man, they are created in the image of God. And we are called to be like the Samaritan, to be the good neighbor. So ways that this parable should challenge us as believers. We need to work on these things. I'm going to give you 3 things that I want you to think about in your life. And as you look at our community surrounding this community that we live in, 1, we need to train ourselves to see the needy. We need to be looking for them. We need to be looking for people that are in need. Imagine how much more you see when you're looking for something, right? I don't know if you found very many 4-leaf clovers in your life, but I guarantee you hadn't if you weren't looking for them, right? They're just, it's something you got to zoom in on. You got to be looking. You got to be focused. You got to be looking for opportunities. As believers, as servants, as the hands and feet of Jesus, man, we should be looking for those that are in need. We should keep our eyes open. We should pay attention. I remember a few months ago we were talking about serving in the community, and Will said, well, I mean, we've announced it 2 or 3 times. Nobody's said anything. I was like, bro, we just need to get in the truck and ride around. I mean, we can see some needs around us, and we need to pay attention to those things. So we need to train ourselves in seeing the needs around us. Secondly, we need to act with compassion. Find practical ways that we can help people around us. Initiate those things. The thing is, a lot of us, man, we're so consumed with me, myself, and I, and my 4 and no more. We're consumed with all of those things in our life that we seldom take time to act on the compassion that God has called us to live in. We need to find practical ways that we can help people through, man, maybe someone's without a car for a while, and does anybody in here relate to that, Miss Sarah? Do you relate to that? She was without a car for a while, and she had some people help her, right? I mean, that's a blessing, right? Maybe you're helping, maybe there's a father that's missing at home, and the mom's working long shifts, and the kids are struggling in school, and you're an ex-teacher. Maybe you can go and help with tutoring. There's just all kinds of things that we could help in acting on compassion if we simply will look for the needy. The third thing, we need to break barriers. I want you to turn over to Galatians with me for just a moment. Galatians, the book of Galatians. Galatians chapter 3 and verse 28. I think I actually crossed this one this morning. This was on my cross-reference this morning in my sermon today. Paul says, there is neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free. There is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Man, what he's saying here, that all people are created in the image of God. We've talked about that, man, that we need to be willing to cross barriers. I want to challenge you to prejudices that are in our minds, okay? So think about this for a minute. All of us were raised in the South. I know with me, man, my dad was raised as a sharecropper. And, man, he frankly was very racist when I was younger. I mean, just very racist. I remember inviting a young boy to go on to a birthday party. And my parents taking me Chuck E. Cheese, man. I was going to Chuck E. Cheese. Boy, I was excited, you know. You pick 2 friends. You can take anybody you want. And I invited this young man to go with me. And when my dad found out who the young man was, he said, now you get to go uninvite him because I'm not riding in the car with him. And it was a tough conversation, you know, and I don't remember how I got out of that, but I'll never forget that. I remember going to spend a night at a friend's house one night, and a couple of his friends came over and spent a night, and when my dad found out that I had spent a night with someone of another color, he was very angry, very upset. You'll never go back over there and stay the night again. That's just pure hatred. I mean, but people were raised that way, and you might say, well, I'm not racist, but I'm going to tell you, like, if your parents were that way, man, there's pieces of that within your DNA, it's within your mindset, and sometimes those things can raise up. I'm happy to say that, man, watching the transformation of my dad spiritually and how he was so proud that I was going to Africa, of all places, to go and to serve and do missions in Africa. He was stoked about it. So God can change a heart like that. God can certainly change a heart like that, but we got to be willing to break barriers, to cross barriers that those around us may say, man, I don't know that you should be doing that. I don't know that you should be doing that. I haven't prepared to tell you this, but you know, one of my, are we on live? We probably are, aren't we? Let's get off of live. You mind?